Hello everyone, I'm going to be going over how to make a walk cycle for your character. Now, I'm specifically going to be showing you with a cutout character, the one that we used in the demo, but you could use the same timing with your own drawings if you were doing a frame-by-frame approach instead. The timing can be very similar. The exact execution might end up being slightly different depending on which approach you choose, and you certainly do not need to go with the cutout, but this is just a quick and easy way to show how this works. So I'm going to just start by giving my scene a name. I'm going to just use the same project, and I'm going to load my character in as a subscene because it's often easier to work with. And actually, before I do that, I'm just going to make a really simple raster background. I'm just going to load in my rigged character as a subscene. And you could do this also if you have a series of drawings that you've made outside of Tahoma. So just right click on the first cell, load level, and in my case, I'm just going to the scene folder for my project and grabbing the skeleton template, which is the character that we used for the rigging demo previously. But if I had another scene somewhere else, I could grab that. I'm just going to click on load. Now I can always import this to make a complete copy of it, or just load it from the current location. If it's in a different project, I do recommend importing it. All right, so here we go. I have my character as a subscene. I'm going to animate him walking in place to start with. And if you take a look on the website, we have a series of poses that we're going to do. And again, it doesn't matter what technique you're doing. Are you doing cutout? Are you doing frame by frame? Are you doing some sort of fusion? Are you doing the plastic deformation? Whatever technique you're doing, we have these same sort of default poses that we use as a starting point. So we start with the contact pose and end with the contact pose. And this is just mid-step. So on my first frame, I'm going to go into the subscene. Oops, I'm going to leave the navigation on, but I'm going to go into the subscene. And I'm going to turn on edit in place so I can see the larger background as a whole. With the skeleton tool in the animate mode, I'm going to work on getting this first pose ready. So I'm just going to set whatever my contact pose is going to look like for this first frame. So the arms and legs are going opposite directions. Toe is on the ground for the back foot, heel is on the ground for the front foot, and the arms are swinging just diagonally opposite from the legs. All right, something like this. Now, I do want to mention when you're working on adding the default poses, this is just the walk at its most simple, but you can certainly add a lot of feeling to the walk depending on the body language that you use. So if I had divided up the torso into a couple of pieces, I could have the shoulders a little bit more slumped over, like he's really tired, or even the timing can have a big impact on making him feel energetic or really weighted down by the world, or just really not wanting to go where he's wanting to go. So thinking about that as you're making these poses is something that can be helpful. All right, but let's say that this is my first pose. I'm just going to, because I'm using the cutout technique, I'm going to go to my first frame, right click on the frame number, insert multiple keys so all of my frames have a keyframe. If you were using your own drawings, you would just have your contact pose be visible on this first frame. So I know that frame 16 is the midway point. This is where the inverse contact pose should go. And it's just the same pose, arms and legs reversed, which gives us the most basic version of our walk cycle. If you're using your own drawings, you would make sure that you have your inverse contact pose right here. Because I'm using the cutout technique, I'm just going to click on the back leg, move it into something similar. And actually, before I go any further, I'm just going to turn on fixed onion skin, and I'm going to extend it to the scene so that I can see for across all of my drawings. That's going to be a little bit more helpful. Now I can move to the drawing on the front and move it into the right position. I do want to mention, if you happen to be doing the cutout technique as well, you can always click on the drawings in the timeline if that's more helpful for you. Looks like that location is a little bit off, so I'm going to go over to the original drawing. I'm going to move the center to a better location, and I might even shift the arm down just a little bit if it's not quite in the right place. And then I'm just going to copy and paste my keyframe so that it's going to still loop perfectly. Now, when I come over, I can continue adjusting the pose as needed. Once I have the back all lined up, then I'm going to move the front, so perhaps something like this. If I'm not happy with these positions, I can spend a little bit more time on the rigging, but I'm just going to move forward with it like this. So if I play through right now, this is the most basic version of a walk cycle. Actually, I'm just going to let it keep looping, but you can see that it's not super realistic. So that is definitely something that I'm going to want to spend time on to improve. So the next pose we have after the contact and the inverse contact pose is the passing pose. So the passing pose is midway between the contact and the inverse contact. And then midway between the inverse contact and the contact is the inverse passing. And so this is where the back foot is passing into the front and it's slightly raised. The other foot is resting firmly on the ground. So what I want to do back in Tahoma is find my midway point, which is frame 8. And I'm just going to click and drag on the frame numbers to scrub through. So the back leg is the one that's passing into the front. So on frame 8, I'm going to be working with the back leg, and that one is going to be a little bit bent with the foot tilted. The front leg is going to be pretty firmly on the ground, something like this. Now, the arms are going to be fairly close to the body. Just going to grab the lower arm in the back here, adjust that. So pretty close to the body. And now I'm going to play through. And on frame 24, I'm going to have the reversed or the inverse version of that pose. I'm going to turn off the contact pose onion skin and turn it on for the previous passing pose. So for the front leg, this one is going to be more bent with the toe tilted, and the back leg is going to be the one that's much more straight. at this point. And the arms just sort of against the body. So something like that. So I'm just going to let that loop through. By itself, this isn't going to be enough. I mean, there's a very slight sense of improvement to the quality of the walk, but what has the biggest difference are the next two poses. So we have the descent pose, which is in between the contact pose and the passing pose. This is where the back leg is raised firmly up. The front leg is firmly on the ground. And so we have the descent pose in between the first contact and the passing, and in between the inverse contact and the inverse passing. And the head is actually slightly lower than the other poses because the entire torso shifts a little bit down. So that is going to be on frame 4. I'm going to turn off the onion skin. And the back leg is in the air. The front leg is going to be pretty firmly on the ground. If you feel like the arms need some adjustments, you can. But something like that. And then on frame 20, halfway between the contact pose, I'm just turning onion skin on, halfway between the inverse contact pose and the inverse passing pose, we have the exact same thing. So anything that needs to be adjusted here can be adjusted just nice and firmly on the ground. And let's play through. And you can see that that is definitely starting to look better, though I do want to also make sure that the torso itself is shifted very slightly down. And I'm going to just lower this a little bit by grabbing onto the green widget. And I'm going to turn on onion skin for both of the other frames so I can see how the foot placement is lining up. And I just want to make sure that the foot is sort of reaching the same point on the ground. And that looks like that's just fine. On frame 20 for my new descent pose, I'm going to just select the torso, slide very slightly down, not too far down. Looks like about there is correct. Just adjust this one just a little bit, but perhaps something like this. And so that gives us a very slight up and down that's starting to happen. And the cycle is starting to look better. Now, the last set of poses are the high point poses. So in between passing and inverse contact, we have the high point. And in between inverse passing and the final contact pose, we have the inverse high point pose. And so this one, the front leg is going to be in the air. This is going to be on frame 12. I'm going to turn off onion skin for now. And the leg in the front is in the air. Perhaps something like this. And the back foot might be something like this. All right, so I'm going to head to frame 28, which is where we're going to have the inverse version. I'm just going to turn on onion skin for frame 12 and going to work on matching up the poses. All right, perhaps something like this. I do want to make sure on this pose that the body gets raised very slightly up for the torso. And it's going to do the same thing on frame 8. So I'm just going to put on onion skin to make sure that I'm raising the same amount. Doesn't need to be huge. Should be sort of the reverse of whatever changed on the descent pose. All right, so about like that. And let's see how this goes. So you can see that my pose is starting to look a lot better. I can work on a lot of different things to keep refining the pose. I mean, I can make small changes to the arms and legs and feet and all of that sort of thing. I can make the descent pose or the high point pose move up and down a little bit more depending on how springy I want my step to feel. I can play around with the overall timing of the pose as a whole, though keep in mind the playback right now isn't super accurate. I do want to mention when you are getting laggy playback, sometimes just zooming out on the viewer will give you a playback that's closer to what it actually should be. So we can see that this is already a little bit better, not perfect, but giving me a decent sense of what the walk looks like. So again, all sorts of corrections that I can do if that's something that I want to do. When I'm finished with the walk itself, I can exit back into the main scene. And I'm going to just add a second frame here so that I can select both and then pull out from the handle to get my full cycle. And I know I have 32 frames right here. While I have this selected, I can just click on the repeat button for whatever number of times I want to repeat up to. So for now, I don't know, maybe I'm going to do 5 steps, so I'll repeat 5 times. And so when I play through, my character is walking. Now at this stage, I can go over with the animate tool and start actually setting the position to the subscene. And so I can move my character into whatever their starting position is. And then I can head over to my ending frame and move them to whatever the ending position is going to be. And I can play through and see how the timing looks. Now, this part right here takes some practice to get right. If you move your character too far in a certain amount of time, they might look like they're sliding. If you move them too short of a distance, they might feel more like they're almost walking in place a little bit at certain points. So that is something that you want to be careful about as you're working. So spend some time adjusting and refining. Try moving your character a shorter distance or a longer distance, or maybe move that distance but have more frames for the walk or fewer frames for the walk. So lots of things we can do to adjust the timing. So I want to remind you, whichever approach you're doing, if you're doing cutout, if you're doing frame by frame, if you're doing something else, get your basic walk loop working so that you're happy with it. And keep in mind, it doesn't have to be just a walk. It could be a run. It could be some sort of similar just movement for going across the scene. But get the movement working in place so that you're really happy with it. And then you can do the tweening with the animate tool for the actual changes in location. Keep in mind you're also going to be adding some other actions into the animation, and you're going to need to have 10 seconds. So that's about 240 frames there. All right, hopefully that will be enough to get you started. That is it for today.